story opens in an elementary classroom where students share what their fathers do. One girl proudly says her dad is a doctor, another mentions her father drives trucks. But when Max speaks, he innocently says his dad's job is lying, leaving everyone confused. A few hours later, Max waits outside school for his father, Fletcher. They plan to meet at 4 p.m., but it's past 6 and he still hasn't arrived. Audrey, Fletcher's ex-wife, shows up equally frustrated. Just as they decide to leave, Fletcher pulls up in his flashy car and instantly throws out an excuse about an important meeting. Max believes him and hugs him, and they briefly look like a happy family until Audrey's new boyfriend, Jerry, appears and kisses her. It's revealed that Audrey and Fletcher divorced months earlier, and Fletcher only visits to see Max. Next, we see more of Fletcher's personality. He's a lawyer who lies effortlessly, both in court and in daily life. He even breaks a promise to take Max to a wrestling match and instead drags him to his office, pretending he needs to finish important work. Max quietly accepts it because he just wants to be near him. As Fletcher walks through the office, he throws fake compliments at everyone. A co-worker with wild hair gets told she looks amazing, and an overweight colleague gets told he's slim. His assistant, Greta, then reminds him that Max's birthday is the next day. Fletcher has completely forgotten, but she saves him by buying a gift on his behalf. Fletcher's boss, Miranda, is introduced as manipulative and demanding. She pressures him into spending nights with her by promising promotions, only to avoid following through afterward. At midnight, Fletcher gives Max the gift, baseball gloves, but Max still feels disappointed that his dad never actually spends time with him. Fletcher again promises he'll be at the birthday party. The next morning, a new client, Samantha, arrives. She plans to divorce her wealthy husband to take half his assets, despite openly seeing another man. Fletcher confidently assures her she can still win, and even encourages her to go for full custody because it increases her payout. Miranda overhears this, kisses him aggressively, and invites him over again that night, claiming she'll finally sign his promotion papers. At Max's birthday party, the celebration is lively, but Max is sad because his father's missing again. Audrey calls Fletcher, but he's with Miranda and uses the same work excuse. Eventually, when Max blows out the candles, he makes a heartbreaking wish for something to force his dad to stop lying forever. Unexpectedly, the wish works. The next morning, Fletcher wakes beside Miranda and suddenly cannot lie. When she asks about the night, he blurts out a blunt, hurtful truth. She gets furious and throws him out. Later in his apartment building, he meets a woman who brags about being popular. Fletcher tries to compliment her, but the truth slips out instead, earning him a slap. He then heads to court for Samantha's case. Richard, Samantha's husband, and his lawyer confront him, saying they have solid proof of her affair, meaning Fletcher is destined to lose. Normally he would bluff, but now every lie collapses. When the judge arrives, Fletcher panics and asks for a postponement, but it's denied. During the break, he rushes back to his office, desperate to figure out what's happening. At this point, Fletcher is stunned. Every time he tries to lie, the truth spills out. Instead of giving fake compliments at work, he ends up insulting everyone, telling the woman with wild hair to shave it and warning the overweight co-worker he's heading toward a heart attack. Panicking, he locks himself in his office, grabs a blue pen, and tries to force himself to call it red, but he physically cannot. He then remembers he promised to pick Max up from school. He calls Audrey and tries to lie again, but she calmly says she expected him not to show up. When she asks what he did last night, he involuntarily admits he was with Miranda. Furious, he snaps the phone and starts yelling. Meanwhile, Max sadly asks Audrey if he's somehow not good enough. Despite trying so hard to spend time with his dad, Fletcher always lets him down. Max confesses that he wished last night for his father to only speak the truth, but he isn't sure whether it actually worked. Audrey reassures him that Fletcher is simply overwhelmed these days and that he will eventually change. A little later, Fletcher fixes his broken phone and calls Audrey again. This time he frantically explains that something strange is happening to him, and he can no longer control what comes out of his mouth. Audrey, exhausted from years of disappointment, finally reveals that she plans to move to Boston with Jerry and take Max with them. The news sends Fletcher into panic, and he immediately rushes toward her home. Unfortunately, he gets pulled over for speeding along the way. Fletcher tries to come up with an excuse as usual, but ends up confessing far too much. He openly admits that he has been ignoring traffic warnings for years. The officer then informs him that he owes $1,600 in accumulated fines from the past 2 decades. With no money to pay on the spot, Fletcher calls Audrey for help. Once she arrives and resolves the issue, Fletcher desperately pleads with her not to leave. He insists he cannot lose his son. In his chaotic life, Max is the only source of genuine happiness. His vulnerability touches Audrey, and she agrees to stay for now, but warns that if he fails to visit Max that evening, she will board the flight to Boston the next morning. She also tells him about Max's heartfelt birthday wish. Hearing this, everything suddenly clicks for Fletcher, and he finally understands why he's unable to lie. Without wasting time, he heads straight to Max's school and pulls him out of class. Fletcher buys him a cake and begs him to undo the wish he made the night before. The boy tries without asking any questions, but when he's done, he says it didn't work. Max explains that the previous night he spoke from the heart, truly wanting his father to stop lying. But now he doesn't feel the same sincerity, so the wish can't be reversed. Frustrated, Fletcher returns to his office and confides everything to his assistant Greta. She thinks he's joking and tests him with a question. Since he cannot lie, he accidentally makes harsh remarks about her, causing her to storm out angrily. Things get worse when Miranda overhears his confession and recognizes what's going on. Wanting to humiliate him, she drags him into a conference room where senior executives are holding a meeting. Knowing he will expose everyone with brutal honesty, she forces him into the spotlight. Fletcher immediately calls out the CEO for constantly passing gas and even labels him a complete failure. The room falls silent for a moment before erupting into sudden laughter. Surprisingly, the CEO bursts into laughter at Fletcher's outburst and thanks him for brightening his day. In the following scene, the court session resumes and everyone returns to their positions. Richard's attorney presents her first piece of evidence, a tape recording containing audio of Samantha engaging in an intimate encounter with her lover. The entire courtroom reacts with disgust. Fletcher tries to respond using his usual manipulative tactics, but since he's unable to lie, he only worsens the situation. Running out of options, he drinks an excessive amount of water and requests a restroom break. Inside the bathroom, he comes up with a bizarre plan and begins beating himself severely. After some time, a guard escorts him back inside the courtroom, where he appears bruised and battered, as if he had been attacked. But when the judge asks if he's able to continue, Fletcher, against his wishes, truthfully says yes. Surprisingly, the judge admires his supposed dedication and rewards him by granting a brief 15-minute recess. During the break, Fletcher calls Max and reassures him that he will definitely see him that evening. He tells his son how important he is, and Max expresses the same affection. Encouraged by the conversation, Fletcher regains his energy. As he heads back toward the courtroom, he bumps into Samantha and the man she was involved with, Kenneth. After a short discussion, they decide to put Kenneth on the stand to clarify the situation. When the session recommences, it becomes Fletcher's turn. He calls Kenneth as a witness, but because he cannot bend the truth, his questions become awkward and counterproductive. Kenneth eventually snaps, angrily admitting that he did, in fact, sleep with Samantha. The courtroom falls silent, and the judge immediately rules in Richard's favor. But unexpectedly, the case takes another dramatic turn. As Fletcher sits down with his head lowered in defeat, his eyes land on a document listing Samantha's personal information, including her age, weight, and other details. Fletcher quickly pieces things together and realizes that Samantha lied about her age. At the time she married Richard, she had actually been only 17, which legally made her a minor. Under California law, a minor cannot sign binding documents, including a prenuptial agreement. This means Richard violated the rules during the marriage process and is technically the one at fault. The revelation shocks everyone in the room, and the judge reverses his decision. Against all expectations, Samantha wins the case and is awarded half of Richard's assets. However, Samantha's greed doesn't stop there. As Fletcher predicted earlier, she demands custody of the children because it would grant her even more financial gain. Unfortunately for Richard, the judge approves this as well, forcing him to give up almost all of his wealth. Richard breaks down emotionally, insisting he cannot live without his children, but the judgment remains unchanged. Witnessing Richard's heartbreak, Fletcher finally understands the real weight of being a parent. He reflects on how he repeatedly ignored Max despite the boy always wanting his attention. Determined to change, he silently vows never to neglect his son again. He even attempts to convince the judge to reconsider and let Richard keep his children, admitting that he manipulated the system and relied heavily on dishonesty in the past. The judge views his outburst as disrespectful, and Fletcher is taken into custody. At the police station, he calls Audrey, begging her to bail him out. Instead, she scolds him for breaking yet another promise. Despite assuring Max he would show up, he still failed to visit. Audrey reveals that she and Max are already on their way to the airport, then cuts the call. The news leaves Fletcher shattered, and he finally accepts that he may lose his son forever. While sitting hopelessly in his cell, someone unexpectedly posts bail for him. It turns out to be his loyal assistant, Greta, who tells him this is his last chance and urges him to go after his son. Motivated by her support, Fletcher jumps into his car and races toward the airport. Unfortunately, when he arrives, he learns that the passengers have already boarded the plane and it is moments away from takeoff. Driven by sheer desperation, Fletcher commandeers a mobile boarding staircase and chases the aircraft across the runway. He hurls one of his shoes at the plane, forcing the pilot to abort the departure. His stunt works. The flight is canceled, but he loses his balance and crashes painfully onto the pavement. A short while later, as he's being carried away on a stretcher, Max excitedly runs toward him. They share an emotional moment, and Fletcher tearfully promises that he will always be there for him from now on. Witnessing their bond, Audrey and Jerry decide to call off their move to Boston. The film then jumps forward a year. Audrey and Fletcher are shown together, celebrating Max's 9th birthday. Just like before, Max closes his eyes to make a wish. When he opens them, he sees his parents kissing. Fletcher jokingly asks if he wished for them to reunite, but Max says all he wanted was a pair of rollerblades. The movie closes with all three laughing together, while Jerry is nowhere to be seen. Like and subscribe for more recaps like this.